Okay, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Thanks for taking the time to join us to listen to Sun's words of advice and her career journey. My name is Yolanda Thayed. I'm a volunteer at the MIT Club of Boston. I'm a parent of a current junior. Um, so you all have probably read Sun's biography when you signed up. Um, I won't read it out, but I will. We'll be talking with Sun about her. We'll have her talk to us about her career path. So, Sun, without further ado, let's dive right into it. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career to date?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation to have me today at the Fireside chat. It's such an honor, especially coming from both of you. So it's such a pleasure to be here and meet with you all and sort of share a little bit about myself. So I was born in South Korea, but moved to the US with my family as a child and spent my childhood in Brooklyn, New York. Unfortunately, I didn't develop any of the Brooklyn accent, which I'm really, really upset about. I first came up to Massachusetts for my undergrad at Smith College, which is an amazing women's college in Western Massachusetts. And it was such an amazing experience being surrounded by women who just love education. And having been a pre-med post-college, I worked at a hospital when I came really to a realization that I love medicine and science, but I wanted to have a broader outreach to the patients and also enjoyed business. So I actually pivoted from research and went to the dark side, as some would call it, the biotech. And I've been in the life sciences industry for about 25 years across a wide range of companies and roles, from leadership roles in global biotechs to being a CEO of an early stage oncology company, really traversing diverse therapeutic areas as well. And between my various companies, I paused my career to get an MBA at MIT Sloan, which was extremely valuable and one that really opened new opportunities for me. It helped me to further internationalize my thinking, given the global diversity of the cohort, as well as broaden my exposure to other industries. And I think that's, to me, it's been very, very instrumental. I tried to bring a global perspective, both given my background, but also because I was based in Europe and worked across EMEA for several years. So currently, I partner with a venture capital firm as a scientific advisor, which works well given my background, but also offers me much flexibility, which I really enjoy given my age, and giving back. And in addition, giving back and supporting the next generation of leaders is really important to me. And I think that resonates with hopefully a lot of the participants or the audience tonight. So, I enjoy my advisory board role for the Termeer Foundation, which is a nonprofit that seeks to really connect biopharma entrepreneurs, first-time CEOs who are looking to catalyze the creation of innovative medical treatment. So, in a nutshell, that's who I am. It's really odd to sort of think about who you are and what you want to communicate, because it sort of makes you reflect on your upbringing and what brought you to where you are today.
That's very impressive, Sun. Thank you for sharing that. So now we'll pivot a little bit. It kind of ties in a lot with what you've told us about your career anyway. What is your definition of a great leadership, and do you think it differs for men and for women?
This is such an interesting question, and I think I have to admit, my definition of great leadership changes. It changes quite often. I think there are sort of core definition. For instance, I think great leadership really comes from a place of authenticity, believing in others, being able to really bring out the best in others, that, and there's this one really creative visual that I came across the other day. Management is like a tugboat. You sort of draw people and sort of bring them along with you. Whereas a great leadership is like a beacon that shines the path for others. It pivots depending on who the audience is and what the situation is and how bright it needs to shine or how dim it needs to be. So, authenticity to me is important. I think being, someone who you aren't can wear you down over time and ultimately won't bring others with you, whether it be employees, investors, you name it. And I think also, in addition to authenticity, curiosity and humility matter tremendously. I think given the pace of change in my industry, biotech, pharma, and many challenges and opportunities that come about, I think being curious and knowing when you don't know something and making that as a catalyst to bring diversity to the table and to the voice around you is important. I think the old notion of command and control type who sort of seems to have every answer and try to figure it out all on your own really creates the risk of blind spots and really can impede building a diverse and empowered leadership team. So I think I think authenticity is important. I think in terms of whether or not there is a difference for men and women, that's such an interesting question. I think there are far more commonalities in terms of leadership traits across men and women for sure. That being said, I think perceptions and biases exist and they matter. And it would be foolish for me to pretend otherwise, despite all the progress that's been made. There remains pressure on women CEOs to be vocal, but never shrill. I think there's always be this, but don't be that. Be confident, but don't be arrogant. Be empathetic, but try not to come across too weak. And smile, but don't be too humble looking. So I think these type of expectations or stereotypes exist for women, but sadly seldom raised when it's about men. I think there was a very interesting study that recently showed that, if, for instance, equity analysts are more likely to downgrade companies when the companies appoint a woman CEO, despite there being zero evidence that women CEOs underperform, and also that female executives get more interrupted when they're speaking. So women in leadership roles need to be cognizant of these biases and know when to push back and do so without trying to emulate some theoretical, male, type of, what a leadership should be, which is, it's not easy to say the least. But I think that's one of the things that differentiates men from women. But I think there are a lot more commonalities.
Thank you. That's very deep. I really loved the leadership as a beacon, not a tugboat visual. And it is sad that we're still talking about women having to face these kinds of issues in their leadership, and then getting their companies downgraded just by the mere fact of them being leaders. Well, can you spend a little time telling us about your leadership journey, the obstacles you faced, and how you overcame them, Sun?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, my background is, I've been in the biotech space for a long time, but I'm not a scientist. And life sciences is an industry that really prizes the science itself, particularly in the sort of the biotech side as opposed to the large pharma. And as a CEO, I was always quick to point that out, that I'm not a scientist, and was sure to share my spotlight with teammates on the R&D side. And that was really important. Also, as a woman of color, I also didn't, sort of present as your stereotypical CEO of an oncology company. And at that time, I looked even younger. So I think it was an odd experience for a lot of investors or, scientific advisors who are first meeting me. So it is, it can be hard not to sort of internalize those outside perceptions. For me, the key was to turn it around and demonstrate that being a leader who prioritizes assembling the right team, connecting the right stakeholders, suppliers, investors, rather than making me the sort of the linchpin. So it helped that it also helped that some of my formative years were at Genzyme. It was a company in Cambridge that's right now owned by Sanofi that had patients first as this mantra. So it was always been a guiding principle for me. And I think for me, it was, don't make it about you. It's about the patients, especially coming from the biotech. And when you remove your ego, or at least try to, because sometimes it's really hard not to have, your ego be bruised, those anxieties tend to diminish over time. To answer the question around, what are the key to overcoming obstacles, for me, it was really having the mentorship, building bridges, and having humility. So when I say mentorship, I mean that in the sense of seeking out mentors, advisors, and thought leaders who have gone through some of the challenges, succeeded, or failed, but have always gone back to try again. And I think it's important to have what I like to consider sort of your council or your group of advisors be as diverse as possible. Try not to find all the people who are going to be always supportive and who are always going to be the cheerleader. You do need some who are going to be wickedly honest with you and say, son, get your head out of, whatever situation you're in, face the reality. You need to do X, Y, and Z, and just tell it like it is. And sometimes those hard medicines are really, really difficult to swallow, but you need it. You need the solid support of, the constant cheerleaders, but you also need those who are going to sort of, get you out of a bind. And I think diversity in terms of where they are in their career is also important. You want to make sure you have people who are seasoned veterans in the industry, but you also want people who are sort of closer to what you're going through. And I'll use my CEO example for that. I had access to great mentors who were CEOs or who've been CEOs for decades and decades. But some of the advice that you would get from those experienced CEOs are great for your personal training, but can be kind of far-fetched from your current situation. So if you surround yourself with people who have similar level of seniority as you, who can relate, sometimes their experience can be a lot more valuable in terms of what you might be going through. And also, don't be afraid to build mentorship or reach out to people outside of your industry. And I think this is also how it has also helped me sort of understand how I think and process issues and challenges that may be, coming my way. So, oftentimes, in addition, emerging leaders can be hesitant to admit their gaps. And I certainly am still realizing what my gaps are. And it's critical to have that, humility and self-actualization to then know how to reach out to others for counsel and support. So, I try to stay close to that mantra of, make time that, will count towards making you a better leader, and try not to be so bogged down by the challenges that you're going through. And now I try to always make time to be that mentor and advisor to others, and really help pay forward what I've received from so many of others over the years.
That's lovely. The younger, not that I think you're older, but what I mean is some of the fresher graduates definitely will benefit from your mentorship. What would you say, Sun, is your greatest accomplishment, and why do you consider that your greatest accomplishment?
I think it would be easier to say what was my worst mistake. But if I have to say greatest accomplishment, I'll actually share what may be my most memorable accomplishment. And it's one that has informed a lot about my approach, even if this, sort of my greatest accomplishment is not professional one. So when I was 7, so my family and I moved to the States when I was about in 3rd grade. So when I was in the 7th grade, I was denied a spot in the honors class for the 8th grade, despite having better grades than some of the kids who had gotten in. And being an immigrant family, my parents really didn't speak much English. I've been in the country for, only a couple of years. When we arrived, I didn't speak a lick of English. So, so I couldn't really rely on my parents to fight my battles. So after realizing that, hey, some of my classmates who didn't, have better grades than I did got into honors class, and why didn't I? I reached out to my teachers and to my guidance counselor, and basically they said there was nothing that they could do. So I went to see the principal, knowing that I had the facts on my side. And, back then, this is, early 80s, going to the principal, you only go if you're called upon. I mean, you never voluntarily go out to see a principal. And I pointed out that, I knew my grades gave me the edge. And, after some back and forth, he committed to getting me in. And that very likely put me on the path that has brought me to where I am today. And also taught me a lesson to insist, to be determined, know your worth, and the importance of fairness. I knew that it was not fair. I knew what I had earned, and I wanted a seat at that table. And that 8th grade experience of being in the honors class, I had the best teacher my entire middle school. That she was my best teacher. And I just think back and sort of think what my experience would have been like had I not done this. And oftentimes, when you're younger, there's that fire in you, something that just like burns you. And on occasion when I find myself thinking, I don't think I could do this, or this is so unfair, I shouldn't have to do this, I reflect back on those moments and say, what was it that lit the fire under my butt, and say, go out and do it. You deserve it. And, I think that to me has definitely stemmed a solid stem from my memory.
That's lovely, Sun. Thank you for sharing that. Now, one of the last questions I'll ask before we turn it over to our attendees to converse with you. What advice do you have for other women in leadership? And you mentioned that you're not a science major, but I feel like your work has actually been by your work you have been a woman in STEM. So specifically women in STEM, but also generally.
Yeah, I would have to say depend on others. So when I started as the CEO of my oncology company, I had not been in a lab for 25 years. The last time I touched a pipette was like 25 years ago. And I had a senior scientist who, you know, we had a very, very lean team, and she was it. I mean, if she called in, the cells were not, being taken care of. So I actually had her teach me how to do some of her job, because we needed to rely on each other. And, I have to say, I think I did a pretty good job of making sure those cells survive. So depend on each other. I think the ability to be humble and acknowledge what you don't know can be a superpower. And because without that, you won't be able to build out your network in the right way. Connecting with others also cannot just be transactional either. It has to be genuine investment of your time and energy. I think oftentimes people go networking for the sake of networking, and that comes across. And I think what I find more valuable in the long run is building that true sense of connection with others, especially women. And also acknowledge that biases that exist against other, female leaders. But, don't let them twist your approach to becoming someone you aren't. And, I think it's coming back to being authentic, know your worth, both for your long-term satisfaction in your career, but also without it, you just won't be able to, influence, motivate, and really be happy at, what you're doing. There's, the great advice of lean in, when you're at a meeting, always lean in. But what I tell people all the time is, before you get to lean in, first you need to have a seat at the table. Fight for that seat. Be ready for that seat. Earlier on in our career, it's like sitting at the kids' table at Thanksgiving. Work on getting to the adult table. And once you're there, pull up a chair for the next generation of female leaders. I think that's really, really important. And if this is a real life situation and you are at the table and there are other women sitting behind you and not at the table, ask everyone to move over. There's always room for another female chair to be at the table. And I think that's, something that we could always do day one. Another, I would say, a practical thing that has really helped me, and this is something that I encouraged others to do, is if you ever get a chance to sit or participate or attend a board meeting, do it. If you are fortunate enough to work for a small company where, your boss is presenting to board members or other scientific advisory committee members, be there. Whether you're participating or not, insist on being there, because you will be surprised by the amount of lesson learned when you get to participate or attend, even as a silent attendee. The type of discussions that get made, the type of decisions that get made are really, really instrumental. And I know this is, predominantly science-driven audience. What distinguishes you from other science people will be your knowledge around business. If you can marry science and business acumen, you will be a golden ticket to any company. So those are my humble comments, just more thoughts as opposed to advice.
Thank you, Sun. Really like the one about bringing others up behind you, up with you. So thank you for that. And now that concludes my set of questions. And so for the audience, we will now turn the recording off. And we invite you to interact with Sun, ask questions. We feel like